When it comes to movie stunts, there's always a risk that something will go horribly awry. For these dedicated stunt actors, things went tragically wrong, and they lost their lives as a result. Director Richard Fleischer has a long list of classics on his resume, including sci-fi favorites like Fantastic Voyage and Soylent Green. But in 1987, just a few years after helming Conan the Destroyer starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, he turned out a comedy caper called $1 Million Mystery that's not quite as well remembered. Unfortunately, what it is known for is an on-set death involving a legendary stuntman named Dar Robinson. Robinson was a stunt pioneer who invented a safety system known as the decelerator, used for stunts involving falls from great heights. He'd worked on several major movies, including Steve McQueen's Papillon and The First Lethal Weapon. In 1986, however, Robinson paid the ultimate price for a daring shot while filming $1 Million Mystery in Arizona. He was completing a motorcycle chase scene when he lost control of his bike in the middle of a high-speed turn, launched off a ledge, crashed into a rock, and impaled himself on a tree. He died en route to the hospital.
I am afraid of most all the work that I do. Anybody who says that they're not afraid of this type of work is either foolish or crazy.
Prior to his death, Robinson had set records with his increasingly daring jumps, inspiring his final film's stunt coordinator, George Fisher, to remark to the Los Angeles Times, "We have a saying, it's always the easy ones that get you." Robinson was 39 when he lost his life. In the early 90s, Steven Seagal was an action superstar. He was also no stranger to controversy, with a reputation for being a total nightmare on set and getting into fights with cast and crew. But a 2000 incident on the Toronto set of his film Exit Wounds wasn't a case of frayed nerves or inflated ego, but a workplace tragedy. Canadian stuntman Chris Lehman lost his life when he and another stuntman were supposed to jump from an upside-down van while it was being towed by a truck. Instead of leaping feet first from the vehicle, Lehman fell on his head, causing injuries that ultimately proved fatal. As a representative of Warner Brothers would later explain to ABC News, he made an error with his footing. He landed badly and hit his head on the pavement. "We are very sad about this. It doesn't happen very often." In addition to multiple skull fractures, Lehman suffered from severe swelling of the brain and died a few days after the accident. Lehman was 35. Jumping from great heights is dangerous, and airbags are crucial in making sure a stunt actor lands safely. But sometimes, even when a stunt person hits their mark, it still goes wrong. Such was the case on the set of Bikini Island, when stuntman J.C. Curran was working on a jump from the Malibu cliffs. It was the first day of shooting, and the scene required Curran to take a tumble of more than 60 feet off the seaside cliff. Though the actor did manage to hit the airbag, it wasn't dead center. He landed on the edge. The resulting bounce didn't send him straight up as intended, but unexpectedly and violently off to the side and in the wrong direction. The force of the bounce sent him speeding directly into the adjacent rock face, and he died from his injuries. Curran was just 34. Westerns were once the biggest genre in Hollywood, and with so many cowboys, ranchers, and rough-riding outlaws on screen, a bevy of stunt riders were needed. One of them was Fred Kennedy, who'd worked all over Tinseltown performing all kinds of horseback stunts, from chases and jumps to falls. Active in the industry since the late 30s, Kennedy had seemingly done it all. He'd even helped train horses in how to fall without injury, following an outcry from the SPCA over animal cruelty. But even the most experienced stunt actors can still have accidents. The 1959 John Ford film The Horse Soldiers included a scene in which Kennedy was to fall off his saddle, a move so difficult that director Ford even offered him a bonus. But when action was called, Kennedy slipped and fell off his stirrup step, breaking his neck when he hit the ground. According to reports, actress Constance Towers, who was supposed to run over to the actor and plant a kiss on him after the fall, noticed he was in distress, but it was too late.
Gosh, the only way you can explain it was like picking up 1,000 breaking bones. He broke his neck.
Kennedy died at the scene. Stunt actor deaths are usually the result of something going wrong, but on rare occasions, the stunt goes off without a hitch and something goes terribly wrong after. That's exactly what happened on the set of the 1978 movie High Riders, when 29-year-old stuntman Vic Rivers drowned in a shallow pond after a car chase that saw him submerged in the water. In the scene, Rivers, an experienced stunt driver who'd previously worked on the cult classic Grand Theft Auto, was supposed to race down a road, fly his car off a bridge, and roll the vehicle over into the body of water below. And he did just that. Rivers' car flipped and plunged into what was described as a 3-foot stream bed located on Paramount Ranch. But after the stunt, Rivers emerged from the vehicle lightheaded and unable to stand. He then collapsed into the water and drowned before help could reach him. It's no surprise to find dangerous stunts in major action movies, but it's a little more unexpected when it happens in a romantic comedy. Yet, over in Australia, one such rom-com actually led to the death of stunt actor Colin Dragsback. It was 1996, and filming was underway on Love Serenade, starring future Lord of the Rings actor Miranda Otto. The tragedy occurred while filming a scene that had Dragsback taking a fall off a grain silo. He was supposed to land on a safety airbag, but a critical error resulted in the device malfunctioning, and Dragsback was killed when it didn't adequately cushion his 29-meter fall. His death cast a pall over the production, one that the film's director, Shirley Barrett, had to work hard to get through. When the film was released, she told the New York Times, "It was absolutely devastating when it happened. It has been very hard for us to live with. To think because of this idea of yours, a comedy even, someone had died. But we just kept going. We had to." Dragsback's death prompted calls for improved safety procedures, but stunt actor Chris Anderson, who ran his own stunt agency, felt that new rules weren't necessary. He argued that it was the attitude of productions that needed to change, telling the Sydney Morning Herald, "The rules and regulations are very good. It's a matter of policing them more properly. People are becoming complacent." Throughout the history of Hollywood, there have been stories about cursed movies whose development, filming, and release were plagued with problems.
You're all going to die.
One of the earliest to earn the cursed label was the 1925 biblical epic Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, which starred Ramon Navarro in the title role. In addition to an out-of-control blaze, a director fired partway through production, leading to a complete page-one do-over, and local riots that halted shooting, a stuntman died filming the chariot race. It all went down during the climactic race, or at least an early take of the action-packed sequence. As reported by Yahoo Entertainment, star Francis X. Bushman, who played one of the chariot racers, described the incident, saying, "During one take, we went around the curve and the wheel broke on the other fellow's chariot. The hub hit the ground and the guy shot up in the air about 30 feet. It was like a slow-motion film. He fell on a pile of lumber and died of internal injuries." In addition to the stunt rider, multiple horses died during production of the sequence. You'll be forgiven for not remembering the 1998 disaster flick Firestorm. Starring former NFL defensive end Howie Long, the film tells the story of a team of first responders partnering with prison inmates to stop a raging forest fire.
Every second counts here. Trust me, you don't want to get caught in the path of a firestorm.
The film was a major box office flop, but not before overcoming plenty of production challenges, including the death of one of its stunt performers. The death was the result of a terrifying mid-air malfunction during the filming of an aerial action sequence. The shoot was underway at the Stiwamus Chief, a granite dome and popular hiking destination in British Columbia. Known for its high cliffs and scenic views, the Stiwamus Chief borders Howe Sound and overlooks several large forests and summits. For the aerial scene, director Dean Semler planned to have stuntman Keith Perepelkin jump from a moving helicopter into the trees below the cliff face. Unfortunately, Perepelkin's parachute didn't open as planned, and he fell to his death. According to a report in the Seattle Times, Perepelkin, age 32, died instantly on impact, with both his main chute and his emergency backup chute failing to deploy. In some ways, the silent film era wasn't all that unlike today's film industry, in which movie makers constantly try to top one another with bigger and bolder productions. But that meant pushing the boundaries of safety in the years before protections for stunt people were put in place. Sadly, that led to many performers losing their lives and productions that became much more audacious and far riskier. Leading the way were films like The Skywayman, which took moviegoers into the wild blue yonder to witness the death-defying aerial action of stunt pilot Ormer Locklear. Known as the King of the Wingwalkers, Locklear dazzled audiences by stepping out of the cockpit and taking a stroll while thousands of feet above the ground, a feat that had to be seen to be believed. He made his screen debut in the 1919 film The Great Air Robbery, and a year later he was cast in The Skywayman as Captain Norman, an American pilot who goes up against German fighters. But in a twist he probably didn't see coming, Locklear's role proved to be the final performance of his life. His death occurred on the final day of shooting during a stunt that involved the use of flares to make the plane appear as if it was engulfed in flames. Shot at an airfield in Los Angeles, the stunt went wrong when Locklear didn't pull out of a dive on time. Crashing into the ground from a height of 10,000 feet, Locklear and his co-pilot, Milt Elliott, died at the scene. Before he was the Caped Crusader, Michael Keaton was a comedy actor, and just 2 years before Tim Burton directed him in Batman, he starred in the 1987 comedy The Squeeze. In the film, Keaton plays a bumbling, beleaguered artist who gets caught up in a blackmail scheme, then gets help from a beautiful private detective.
Hi, Rachel Dobbs. A pleasure.
See? This is working.
The film made the news before it hit theaters when a stuntman died while shooting a scene on location in Hoboken, New Jersey. Veteran stuntman Vic Magnotta, who worked on such 80s classics as Splash and Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill, was filming a car chase that was to culminate with a dramatic vehicular dive into the Hudson River. But after speeding off a specially designed stunt ramp and doing a flip into the water as intended, the windshield was dislodged, and Magnotta became trapped in the car beneath the surface. Rescue divers who were waiting in the water to pull Magnotta from the vehicle were unable to remove him from his safety harness in time to save his life. Plenty of movies have portrayed epic battle scenes involving hundreds of actors, extras, and stunt performers, but in the early days, those kinds of sweeping war movies could lead to serious injury and even death. One of the worst such incidents occurred on the set of The Charge of the Light Brigade, the 1936 Errol Flynn classic about a British officer serving in India in the 19th century whose fiancée is swept off her feet by a handsome fellow officer. The film is famous for its pulse-pounding military action, including a climactic battle with over 100 actors on horseback. Of course, back in the 1920s, horses in film were physically tripped by a wire to make them fall, often leading to injuries or even the death of those animals. And in the making of The Charge of the Light Brigade, dozens of horses were killed, with some estimates placing the total at nearly 200 equine deaths. But it wasn't just animals who died. A stunt rider also lost his life due to the sloppy setup. He fell off his horse onto an upended sword sticking out of the sand and was impaled through the chest. Following the success of Lethal Weapon 3, Danny Glover and Joe Pesci re-teamed for the 1997 Disney comedy Gone Fishin', a story about two fishing buddies who become targets of a career con man. The production made extensive use of water stunts, and during the making of one action scene, a boat crash led to the death of 29-year-old stuntwoman Janet Wilder. As fate would have it, Wilder was aboard the boat with fellow stuntman Scott Wilder, her husband, who, along with several others, managed to survive their injuries. The deadly boat crash took place during a sequence in which Pesci and Glover's characters were supposed to jump their boat over a patch of mangroves and land between two boats. Stunt doubles were used for the two stars, and the first take of the scene was deemed unacceptable. Director Christopher Kane wanted a do-over. He was unhappy with the take because of the slow speed of the boat. A second take on another day increased the speed, but at the cost of Wilder's life, as the boat was sent hurtling off a stunt ramp, colliding with two boats full of extras. A movie sequel to Jules Verne's classic 19th century novel, Around the World in 18 Days, stars William Desmond as Phineas Fogg, the grandson of Verne's globetrotting character. During production of the 12-part silent cinematic serial, stunt double Gene Perkins was hired to help stage a wild sequence where he was to dangle from a plane on a rope ladder and drop onto a moving train. He didn't survive the stunt. Director Clarence Brown told a 1927 issue of Photoplay that a stunt pilot miscalculation resulted in Perkins' death. In Brown's version of events, Perkins was suspended on the ladder, which was hanging from the plane, and the pilot was supposed to maneuver him above the train just low enough that he could safely jump onto the roof. But Brown said, the pilot swooped too low, the ladder banged Perk against the side of a freight car at 75 miles an hour, and Mrs. Jean Perkins was a stunt widow, that's all. The film, including footage of the stunt Perkins gave his life for, no longer survives and is considered one of many examples of lost media. The Indian film industry is booming, but as with Hollywood, stunts have sometimes resulted in death there as well. One recent catastrophe happened on the set of the 2023 film Viduthalai Part 1, co-written and directed by Vetri Maran. Viduthalai Part 1 is the story of a police constable on the hunt for the leader of an extremist dissident group called Makal Padai. It's a tense crime thriller full of exciting action scenes, but one of them left stuntman Suresh dead. Suresh was filming a stunt that required him to swing from a rope harness suspended from a crane as part of a sequence involving a train crash. Unfortunately, something went disastrously wrong when the stuntman was 20 feet in the air. The rope holding him to the crane snapped. Suresh fell to the ground and was mortally wounded. Rushed to a nearby hospital, he was pronounced dead on arrival. The Great Circus Mystery is another 1920s silent serial that's been lost to time. It starred Joe Bonomo in an adventure story about the search for a valuable ruby. Not only is the film impossible to see today, but it's one of those long-forgotten pieces of entertainment that's just as hard to find information about as it is to watch. But one thing we do know about the production is that in one of its thrilling chase scenes, 2 stuntmen lost their lives. The female star of the serial was Louise Lorraine, though she preferred to do all her own stunts as often as possible, a practice that was more common in the silent film era. When it came to a particular car chase scene, director Jay Marchant insisted Lorraine not be in the car and let a stunt double take her place. During shooting, it at first seemed like the stunt went off without a hitch. The car, occupied by stuntmen Frank Tully and Tony Brack, went careening out of control, toppled over, and came to a stop in a devastating crash. But when the cameras stopped rolling, both Tully and Brack were dead. Footage of the moment of their deaths was kept in the finished film. There have been countless movies based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan, from the earliest silent films to a big-budget modern reinvention starring Alexander Skarsgård. 2016's The Legend of Tarzan didn't kick off the franchise that the studio might have been hoping for. But back in the 1940s, the Tarzan films were among the most popular adventure series in theaters. Regrettably, however, in filming Tarzan and the Mermaids, the 1948 film that concluded actor Johnny Weissmuller's iconic portrayal of the Lord of the Jungle, a stuntman was killed on set. The 12th and final Tarzan film to star Weissmuller, who began his run in 1932 with Tarzan the Ape Man, the film saw the jungle adventurer come to the aid of a young woman who's being forced to marry a despotic madman. The film involved loads of stunt work in water, as you'd expect from the title, and Mexican stunt performer Angel Garcia was tasked with performing a cliff dive into the ocean. While executing the maneuver during the production in Acapulco, though, Garcia dove into the water, and from there, reports vary as to whether he was killed when he struck a raft or when waves slammed him back against the cliffs. Many stunt performers have died tragically over the years, but few of these deaths have been as unsettling as the recent loss of an Indian stuntman named Vivek in the 2021 romantic thriller Love You Rachchu. During filming, Vivek was caught on a high-tension wire that wasn't part of the stunt and was electrocuted. He was rushed to a hospital but didn't survive. In a statement reported by the India Times, police said, stunt performer Vivek was performing the stunt for the film Love You Rachchu and standing on a crane near an 11 kV electric wire. Somehow, a metal wire came in contact with the wire, and he got electrocuted. Vivek's death led to the film's director and producer being detained by local police as they investigated potential negligence on the part of production. A government official commented that safety standards on the film may have been ignored, and Vivek's death became the catalyst for safety reform in the country's movie industry. The film's star, Ajay Rao, also commented on the incident, telling the India Times, "I heard their screams and rushed to see what happened and came to know that Vivek died on the spot. I was not part of the scene, a high-tension line was nearby, and the film crew stocked water around the spot for the fight scene." The most famous death involving a helicopter on the set of a movie is the catastrophe that killed Vic Morrow and 2 Vietnamese children during the filming of Twilight Zone, the movie. But there's another equally horrific but lesser-known helicopter-related tragedy that occurred during the making of the 1981 Indian film Kolilakkam. The movie's star, Malayalam stuntman Krishnan Nair, who went by the stage name Jayan, was killed during a daring sequence where he rode a motorbike and jumped aboard the helicopter while it was mid-air. Jayan had been a stunt performer for years, and as the lead of the film, he was happy to perform all of his own stunts. He had high expectations, reportedly demanding a second take when he wasn't happy with the first. It was one of the last mistakes he'd ever make. While cameras were rolling and Jayan was hanging onto the copter's skids, the pilot lost control of the aircraft, crashing it into the ground below and killing the actor on impact. The Clint Eastwood action thriller The Eiger Sanction may be one of the actor's most underrated movies. He stars as a retired assassin brought back for one more mission after the death of a close friend. Joining a team of mountaineers, his job is to ferret out a Soviet spy while scaling a treacherous peak in the Swiss Alps.
In your opinion, do these men climb to prove their manhood, or is it more a matter of compensating for inferiority feelings?
Engaging, action-packed, and brimming with first-class location stunt work, The Eiger Sanction was the perfect vehicle for Eastwood. Unfortunately, the production wasn't a pleasant experience for many involved, and was capped off by the death of climber and photographer Dave Knowles. The film was shot on location on the treacherous Eiger Mountain. Climbers had died on the mountain previously, and shooting an action thriller on the cliff face had never been attempted. The tragedy came when production wanted to get a point-of-view shot of climbers seeing rocks fall on them. Chick Scott, another climber who worked on the film, said in a 2015 interview with Jasper Fitzhugh, "I can't say I had a premonition, I just felt really frightened and didn't want to be there."
I didn't actually kill him, you know. Well, I probably won't actually kill you.
Scott took a break during the rockfall sequence and later tried to join Knowles atop the mountain by helicopter. But when he arrived, he was told there'd been a deadly incident. He recalled, "We flew up to that same location and there was the scene that we had been faking for 2 days. Dave Knowles hanging dead on the end of the rope." According to Scott, production was halted and the crew regrouped, but they resumed filming several days later. The accident shook the cast, including Eastwood and the other stuntmen, who took out 6-figure life insurance policies before going back to work.